What I'd like to do next is to add some hardware debouncing by adding capacitors to the two pins, the DT and CLK pins, the pins that report positioning and positioning change information to the Arduino. So I'm going to add these two capacitors. These are marked as 104M. So 104 means that the capacity of these capacitors is 0.1 microfarads. M is the tolerance of this device. I think it's about 10 or 15%, not very good tolerance, but in a way they're cheap. The way that I came up with these values is via trial and error. Remember that my objective was to remove the bouncing of the switching of the rotary encoder, and the perfect value to use would be the one that produces the least bouncing effect, as I was able to check using the oscilloscope and the output in this serial monitor. And the exact value depends on many things, like the physical specifications of the device, the length of the wires, the capacitance and inductance between all these components. And I did try a lot of different combinations until I came up with the one that seems to be working best for me. So I'm going to use these two for this demo. In your case, it might be slightly different, but I think if you try to replicate as close as possible what I've got here, these two values, these two capacitors, so 0.1 microfarad, will work. Because it's hard to make everything fit in the space that I've got available on the breadboard, I'm going to use another breadboard. So I'm going to unplug these and plug them in here, like that. Then I'm going to use two wires, so I suppose I'm going to take the yellow and connect it to the orange, closely colors matched, and the blue for the green, like that. I'm going to leave the leads from the oscilloscope as they are, since they worked fine so far, and I'm going to plug in the two capacitors. So these are not electrolytic, they are ceramic capacitors, so the orientation doesn't really matter. So I'm going to plug, say, one lead here and here, and the other one between that and that. So the capacitors have got one common column in the breadboard. And then I'm going to connect these two pins of the capacitors that are on the same column to ground. All right. So what about the oscilloscope? Let's reset it and let's move clockwise first. All right, so slightly better signal. You can see here that this is the effect of the capacitor. So on the way back up, you've got a slight gradual increase of the voltage on the capacitor. So you can move that down a bit, so you can see it here. So this is the effect of the capacitor. If you add a larger capacitor, then this will be a bit more gradual. This is not what you want. If you get a smaller capacitor, you're not going to be able to filter out the bouncing and the noise. So with the 0.1 microfarad capacitor that I found, it seems like it's the optimal for keeping this curve as small as possible. What about anti-clockwise? All right, so you can see anti-clockwise, a bit of noise here, probably as I touched the device and I moved it a bit. Maybe there was a bit of discharge, who knows. But on the way back up, you got the same nice clean signal. I'll move the rotary encoder a few steps in one go to get an effect like that. So as I'm moving the knob of the encoder faster, you can see that I've got multiple steps recorded always blue first, followed by the yellow, blue first, yellow, blue first, yellow. And you can still see a spike up here, right? So that's still a bit of noise, not perfect. What else can I do? The other possible improvement is to go back to the sketch and improve my debouncing by adding some software debouncing code. So in this version of the sketch, I've got the exact same code as before, but now inside the interrupt service request routine, I've got a bit of debouncing. So I'm setting up a local variable that keeps track of the time that the routine was executed, so the interrupt time. I'm just pulling the millis function from the Arduino. I get the time here, and then I check in to see if the interrupt time now minus the interrupt time last time that the interrupt service request routine was executed is larger than 5 millis. So if it is larger than 5 millis, then I will happily go inside here and do exactly the same thing that I did before. Determine the rotation of the knob and either add or subtract 1 from the virtual position. And then to finish up, I record the current interrupt time, which will become the last interrupt time. So this is very simple software debouncing. It will ignore any call of the interrupt service routine that was done within 5 milliseconds of the previous call. So let's upload it. This is the only, I think. Yeah, so let's upload it and see what difference that makes to the way that the Arduino will read the change of position of the encoder. Okay, so let's turn the knob. All right, so much cleaner than before. Can see it. Still not perfect, but better than before. Hardware-wise, there is no difference at all. So I'm not even going to bother with the oscilloscope, but the software now works a little bit better. You can see that I am getting a better count, except for this log. So going anti-clockwise now, you can't see it. Okay, it's better. I'm going anti-clockwise, so the counts are usually increasing. Still a bit of noise, but better than before. What I also discovered was that the performance improves if I remove all the leads from the oscilloscope. So I'll actually do that now. So there's no external factors that are messing up with my circuit. Let's see if that has an effect. Anti-clockwise going up, 21, 22, 23, and so on. Clockwise going down. All right. So it's slightly better. But I got the best results when I actually connected the 2 capacitors right on the pins on the Arduino itself. So not even the breadboard. It seems like the breadboard is introducing a few effects, probably a bit of capacitance here, inductance, who knows, those mess up with the signal. So the signal integrity improves a lot if I move these here. Even things like the length of the leads, the length of the pins of the capacitors, the materials, and the lengths of the jumper wires, all those have an effect on the behavior of the rotary encoder in this case. And that's because it's a cheap encoder with a lot of bouncing happening. So these are the factors that you'll have to consider when you're building a device that is using the encoder as an input. To wrap it up, a rotary encoder is a very useful device. You can use it to detect change in the position of a knob on it. You need to take care to write your sketch and to create your hardware circuit in a way that deals with the bouncing effects of the fact that the encoder internally is built using conductive materials and lots of little switches in here. So I hope you find this useful. If you have any questions, please send me a message or use the forum.